Okay, I was just given a heads up that a few of these important articles have been changed on Wiki that I went off on about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, on a couple of pages, and were changed very recently. One of which extremely recently. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me go check it out. So I just want to go ahead and go through this again to make sure that the thing that I put out is not saying something that's off dated or weird like that. This is about Asselar Man, so we're going to talk about him first. Asselar Man is a Neolithic skeleton discovered by Theodore Monad and Vladimir Basnard, in various sources incorrectly named as M.M. Basnard or M.V. Basnard. Yeah, I think it was M.V., but I thought the V was for Vladimir. But I hope that's not the correction that's on this one, but whatever. It was found in 1927, and they talk about Neolithic skeleton. And so when you talk about Neolithic, there's these ancient houses and stuff of people. The final division of the Stone Age, it began about 12,000 years ago. How they've changed it. When the first developments of the farming appeared in the Epipaleolithic Near East and later in other parts of the world. The Neolithic division lasted until the transitional period of the Chalcolithic about 6,500 years ago. But that number might be going to have to change here shortly too. But yeah, and so they've got it at 12,000, so they throw it at Younger Dryas type or end of the last ice age type time. Okay, so, but it was found in 1927 in the Adar des Foghas. The massif is located near Essouk in what is now the Kadal region of Mali. Wycliffe Drapier funded the expedition. The Aslar specimen has been dated to around 6,400 years before present. They've got BP on it. Whenever they say BC, that's before zero, and we're at 2000. So whenever they say before present, you're basically right now adding 2,000 years to it. Well, it'd be 2020, but you get the idea. And they're throwing it to hundreds pretty much on this for archaic dating. So 6,400 BP would only be 4,400, but it used to be like 6,600, I swear. So it may have lost 200 years worth of dating in it. I'm unsure about that, but I hope that just the name correction up there is not the only thing that's changed. But let's go on. Making it no older than the Holocene. Well, of course it's not older than the Holocene. It's not even older than the Neolithic. What do they say about the Holocene here? Oh, okay, so here's your little chart here, and where's my pointer at? So we're looking at something that this is 4,400 or whatever years ago, and so right in here in this range, and you can see down at the bottom here it says climactic optimum. One thing I'd like to notice about this, here's where it comes up at 12,000 years the Younger Dryas, and then it rides up and goes through all of this. And you can see this little faint dotted line that runs across here about where I'm right at when I move my thing. You can see the dotted line that's there. So I've used this a couple of times in a couple of my videos where these climate change guys have said all kinds of freaky stuff. For if you look, what they're calling the climatic maximum, an optimum, is a maximum, and it's above the line all through this area, and we've gone down colder, and now right at the very end of it we're doing this little dip. But this is the younger, this is not the younger, this is the little ice age effectively, and we come back out of that. So sure, it looks like it's warming up and everything, but duh. And where are we at in relation to where it was not too many? Oh, and is this all cow farts and us and everything too? And so their correlation doesn't work well. Let's just say that. But of course, it's before the Holocene. And so 4,400 years BC or 6,400 before the present. Let's keep up with that. Along with such fossils as Iwa Aliru. Now, this is at 11,000 years before present, and it apparently lost 100 years because it used to be 9,100 BC. And I've said that for years now. And but it was December 2005. So, well, no, that's a French correspondence thing on it. When is this thing date? 2016, it was updated again, too. So, For years I've been saying it though, and I think that part of it they've had for as soon as it came out. They talk about Ashango at 8,000 years before present, and Ashango is so that'd be 6,000 BC. But there's a problem with those, and the reason they separate the names here, and we'll get to that here in a minute, which were excavated from archaeological sites in the West and Central Africa. Asselar man is the oldest known anatomical modern human skeletons of a negroid type. Oh, okay. So it's the oldest one, Asselar man. So what are these other ones? Older fossils with a similar morphology have also been near Khartoum, dated to 8,000 and 5,000. Well, what did they do before this? Well, if you look at Iwaliru, they tell you they have this primordial type skeleton. They didn't really have the nose for it and everything, but they've got a couple of specimens out of it. And so let's see if they can go with it. 9250 BC plus or minus 200. So yeah, well 9100 BC, that still fits the number. So apparently if they changed it, they didn't change that. Okay. And description, cranial vault, and it had extra brow ridges and stuff going on to it. Frontal rays pointing to a frontal sinus development, everything, da da da. So this is not actually a modern human, and that's what they're telling by all these formations here. Analysis. Let me see. Here, man to the late Pleistocene implies that the transition to anatomically modernity in Africa was more complicated than previously thought, with late survival archaic features and possible deep population substructure in Africa during this time. Late survival of archaic features, like Homo erectus type features and stuff, still holding on, and at this late date. But where's the statement? So they have changed this, I guess. I'm trying to read through it real quick here, guys, other than saying all this to you. See if I can find the popular statement. Let's see. Summarized at three dominant explanations for Irregular man's atypical cranial shape. First, that the Irregular was a hybrid with archaic African populations of something else that wasn't. The second, that Iwaliru man was a member of a relict archaic population that was replaced by more modern humans upon the onset of the Holocene. And third, that Iwaliru man was part of the population that diverged from the rest of North African's populations during a time of acute aridness in the Sahara Desert that made it impassable until the arrival of the African human period. Ching, ching, ching. Do, 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 do. So I don't see it because what they were saying before. Oh, I just went right over it twice. I'm sorry. These people said that the sloping frontal vault was more pronounced in Irregular man than in both other Neolithic and recent sub-Saharan skull samples they were talking about, which are the ones that they were mentioning. However, they also found that the occipital structure and nasal root of the frontal bone of the skull would qualify for identification as that of a proto-West African Negro. So this is the oldest known Negroid type found, and it's a proto-Negroid, so it's not a modern human, at 9100 BC. And the other one here that we're looking at is actually the modern, and they say it's the oldest one at 4400 BC. That's it. They might one day find different, but because they find proto, it's so easy behind it, so early, so recent behind it, it makes that almost an impossibility. They have 5,000 year old and 6,000 BC, so it seems like that would be it. So let's look at the other article here, for this is Jebel Irhoud, and this is a cave system that's in North Africa. Let's see if I'll go ahead and do this and show you where it's at. It's right over here up on the little coast on a bump. Oh man, I can't get it to move slightly. It's basically right here. And if we go back this picture, here's one of the skulls that they found. And one thing they're going to talk about in this is that it's got a pronounced brow, more pronounced, and that they had thought at the time that he may have been a recent hybrid of a Neanderthal or something, but they've gone farther into it, and let's see what it says now. Well, you can't see the bottom of it and the date that it gives, and that's good, so we're going to get to that here in a minute. Jebel Irhoud, and romanicized is Jabal Irhoud, which Gabal has to do with like Hannibal, and so on, and of course Romans, and they had to do with them, blah 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 blah. That's much later than this, though, a lot later. I'll show you how much later. So in the Berbers, they call it Adar Irhoud, and an archaeological site located just north of the locality known as Tiet Irhoud, about 50 kilometers or 30 miles southeast of the city of Safi in Morocco. It is noted for the hominin fossils that have been found there since the site's discovery back in 1960. Originally thought to be Neanderthals, the specimens have since been assigned to Homo sapiens, modern humans, and have been dated to roughly 300,000 years ago, give or take about 15,000 years, because they're going to talk here in a minute about pegging a date at 315,000. And now it's just kind of lingua franca to, when you talk about this, apparently, due to 3 or 4 other articles I've seen, just to say 300,000. 300 KYA. And so they found that, and that dating is for the Jebel Irhoud 3 mandible, 315 plus or minus 34,000 more years based on the fossils and the flint artifacts found nearby. So they can't exactly connect it to it, but there were people there at the time, and they're saying, well, there's a skull that seems to be somewhat later of it, but this could be that, but they're not going to attach it to it at this point. And so that'd be 315 to, what is that, 350,000 roughly. But they're saying 300K for it now because of a few things that they've done and new testing methods that they've used and got calibrated now. Let's look into what it says. The site is the remnants of a solutional cave filled with 8 meters of deposits from the Pleistocene era, located on the eastern side of the Karsic outcrop of limestone at the an elevation of 562 meters above sea level. It was discovered in 1960 when the area was being mined for the mineral baryite, and a miner discovered a skull in the wall of the cave. He extracted it and gave it to an engineer who kept it as a souvenir for a time, believe it or not, and it was eventually handed over to the University of Rabat, who organized a joint French-Moroccan expedition to that cave in 1961 at the site, headed by French researcher Emile Inouki. Inouki's team identified the remains of around 30 species of mammals, some of which are associated with the Middle Pleistocene era, so that's way back. It's going to tell you here before the Quaternary period, or it's still part of it, before the Chibanian period, and so on. But the stratigraphic provenance was unknown. Another excavation was carried out by Jacques Tiquier and Roger Bales Hermans in 1967 and 69, in which 22 layers were identified in the cave, down through dating of time. The lower 13 layers were found to contain signs of human habitation, including an industry classified as Lavalas Mosseterian. See what they show you about this. Lavalas is a type of stone art, and apparently of Caucasians here, and Mosseterian style. And Mosseterian is usually connected with Neanderthals, but now they found it in a few other sites that's not, where they had similar tools, and it could have been from that meeting and so on. But now, looking at that meeting that was supposed to have happened some 40, 50, 60,000 years ago, seems to be hundreds of thousand years ago, possibly. But I think the genetics shows that it seems to have, even though they may have had interactions quite a bit, it only happened much later. This is one redoing of this. I did a video last year where they did a redoing of this and a couple of others, and instead of looking like this, but you can still see it, he looks like Tim Allen whenever he's doing the Santa Claus. See it a little bit? Well, one of the other ones looked like Jim Carrey, if you remember. And one of the others looked kind of like Chuck Norris. The site is particularly noted, and the girl looks like Shakira. This is particularly noted for the hominin fossils around here. Inoke discovered the skull, which he termed Irhoud 1, and is now on display at Rabat Archaeological Museum. He discovered part of another skull, designated Irhoud 2, and following year subsequently uncovered the lower mandible of a child, designated as Irhoud 3. So these are separate finds in each one and different digs, and so they're separating them. Texas excavation found 1,267 recorded objects, including skulls, a humerus designed designated Irhoud 4, and a hip bone recorded as Irhoud 5. But they found a lot of other skulls and everything, but they aren't talking about it being humans, but they found human hip bone, human femur, right? That's 5. Further excavations were carried out by American researchers in the 1990s and by a team led by Jean-Jacques Hublin from 2004. Animal remains found at the site have been enabled the ancient ecology of the area to be reconstructed. It was quite different to the present and probably represented a dry, open, and perhaps steppe-like environment, roamed by equids, bovids, gazelles, rhinoceros, and various predators. And we've talked about the Green Sahara and how it was, and they're saying, well, back whenever this was going on, there's a period of that going on too, and there's cycles of it when the monsoons get pulled across that way. It has to do with sun cycles and the spinning of the earth, but we're not going to get into that right now. So the dating. The finds were initially interpreted as Neanderthals, right? That's the Max Planck Institute, and they're one of the world's most renowned sites for dating and genetics and stuff, and they've done a lot of Egyptian work that I've made comments on. But they were introduced, or first initially were interpreted as Neanderthals. Basically, that major cranial bone and the brow ridge was kind of doing it. But as the stone tools also were found with them were believed to be associated to be exclusive with Neanderthals, they also had archaic features believed to be representative of Neanderthals rather than Homo sapiens necessarily, so they're thought to be around 40,000 years old. But, so 40,000, so easily 4 times the amount of whatever. But no, hold on. But this was thrown out and thrown into doubt by faunal evidence suggesting a middle Pleistocene date of around 160,000 years. Yeah, the plants that were at that date were not preserved for 120,000 years and then put in there with them, and so they redated it. But then the fossils were reappraised as representing an archaic form of Homo sapiens, or perhaps the populations of Homo sapiens that had interbred with Neanderthals, right? So they're saying somewhat proto, or that maybe it wasn't necessarily a proto, but it got that extra brow ridge from breeding with Neanderthals. Now that that's such of an age that there's really no way to get DNA out of them, one wonders if that new test could pull off something magical, but we'll keep going here. This was consistent, though, with the idea that the then oldest known remains of Homo sapiens dated to around 195,000 years and found on the Omo Kibish in Ethiopia, Caucasians there at the time, indicated an Eastern African origin for humans at around 200,000 years ago. And people had that idea going on for a long time. But wait, it gets worse, or better, or more interesting, whichever way you're looking at it, right? However, dating carried out by that Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig revealed that the Jebel Irhoud site was far older than first thought. Fresh excavations carried out in 2004 by the Hublin team again revealed more than 20 new bones from the remains of at least 5 people, apparently at a deeper portion even, and a number of stone tools. The finds included a part of a skull, a jawbone, and teeth, and limb bones, which had come from 3 adults and a juvenile and a child aged about 7.5 years old. So they're getting pretty good archaeological site. Yeah, they can tell that much about it. The bones look similar facially to those of humans today. Ding! But had a much larger lower jaws and elongated brain cases. Bing! They have similar features to the Florisbad skull dating to 260,000 years ago, found at the other end of the continent. I will be doing a separate one about that shortly. For Florisbad is a skull that they found here, and that's way down in South African Cape, found at a dating of 260,000 BC, but they're saying that it's Homo heidelbergensis, which they say directly correlates and leads into Cro-Magnon man, which is now called early European hunter-gatherers because Cro-Magnon man's DNA has been captured and sampled, and they find that he's still extant today. It's still here. Yeah. So, isn't that interesting? But found down at the other end of the continent. In Florisbad, South Africa, which has been attributed to Homo sapiens on the basis of the Jebel Irhoud finds. So at first they were saying it might have been something else, but they go, no, that's pretty much, okay, that's got to be a proto modern human, which is Homo sapiens, not Homo sapiens sapiens. We've already clarified about Negroids, but coming out of this grouping here, in the middle of this point, comes people that are known as the Denisovans and so on, and there ends up being a definite off-split that becomes the Oriental people, and the variations on it, for it's not one variation, just like black people aren't a variation, like the Khoisan aren't really related to them, the Nilotics aren't really related to them, and so on. But let's continue. The tools were found alongside gazelle bones and lumps of charcoal, indicating the presence of fire and probably cooking in the cave. The gazelle bones showed characteristic signs of butchery and cooking, such as cut marks, notches consistent with marrow extraction and charring. Some of the tools had been burned due to fires being lit upon or on top of them, presumably after they had been discarded or into the fire, maybe. This enabled the researchers to use thermoluminescence dating to ascertain when the burning had happened, and by proxy, the age of the fossil bones. It's another way they've found to be able to date things of extreme ages, but which were found in the same deposit layer, by the way. The burnt tools were dated to around 315,000 years ago, and that's another reason they want to peg that number, indicating that the fossils were about the same age. This conclusion was confirmed by recalculating the age of Irhoud 3 mandible, which produced an age of range compatible with that of the tools at roughly 280 to 350,000 years ago. So spanning the time, but using the other method. If they hold up, these dates would make remains by far the earliest known example of Homo sapiens found yet in the world. And I say found yet in the world because they show you where right there they went through 3 datings of things, and they talk about East Africa, and there was one before that that was the oldest human found, and so on. So, and archaeology's not that old, but they've been looking. They've been looking everywhere. This suggests that rather than arising in East Africa around 200,000 years ago or so, modern humans may have already been present across the length of Africa 100,000 years earlier. Yep, all over the place. These proto-Caucasians. According to study author Jean-Jacques Hublin, the idea is that early Homo sapiens dispersed around the continent, and elements of human modernity appear in different places, and so different parts of Africa contributed to the emergence of what we call modern humans today. Early humans may have comprised a large interbreeding population dispersed across Africa, whose spread was facilitated by the wetter climate that created a green Sahara, much like it was around there, but around 300 to 300,000 years ago. The rise of, and this is predating other people, as proven by where we started. So, the rise of modern humans may thus have taken place on a continental scale rather than being confined to a particular corner of Africa, like some people were, and much later. Hublin and his team also attempted to obtain a DNA sample from these fossils, but these attempts were unsuccessful. Oh, okay, so this is some of the add-on stuff, because I was waiting on if we could get any of this. Genomic analysis would have provided the necessary evidence supporting the conclusion that these fossils are representative of the main lineage leading up to modern humans, and that Homo sapiens had dispersed and developed all across Africa. Because of the unclear boundaries between different species of the genus Homo and the lack of genomic evidence from these fossils, some doubt of the classification of them as Homo sapiens. Questions remain over the classification of these fossils somewhat, and here's a picture of it here, but they say that's a conglomeration back together of a crushed skull, one of the good ones, non-prognostic, and it has the brows that you can see there that are a little more exaggerated than modern day, but non-prognostic, and we'll get there. Where are we at here, guys? 27 minutes, we're doing good. Morphology. When comparing the fossils with those of modern humans, the main difference is the elongated shape of the fossil's brain case. Ding! According to the researchers, this indicates that brain shape, and possibly brain functions, evolved within the Homo sapiens lineage and relatively recently. Evolutionary changes in brain shape are likely to be associated with genetic changes of the brain's organization, interconnection, and development, and may reflect adapted changes in the way the brain functions. Such changes may have caused the human brain to become more rounder and 2 regions in the back of the brain to become enlarged over thousands of years of evolution. The Jebel Irhoud individuals also had very thick brow ridges and lacked prognathism, so it says it right there. The degree of tool development is similar to modern European children of the same age, but teeth roots develop faster than for modern humans in these guys, and slower than for apes and some other fossil hominids they've found. So, this is kind of interim. And somewhat, wilder animals seem to grow up quick, but as they get larger and larger brains, it seems to take much larger to grow them up to the full amount. And so they're indicating also that this was already going on then and shortly after, right? Similar to modern human European children, and that's why, of course, they connect them to that. Tooth crowns took a larger time to form, though, than in modern humans. So, in other words, when you get your molars and the things in the back and the crowns that you get off of it, seem to take a longer time. So your wisdom tooth might have been something that came in a little bit later than we currently do. While the Jebel Irhoud specimens were originally noted to have been similar to later Alterian and Ibermerasian specimens, further examinations revealed that Jebel Irhoud specimens differ from that in that the Jebel Irhoud specimens have a continuous supraorbital torus, while the Alterian and Ibermerasian specimens have a discontinuous one and are in some cases none at all, showing you there it goes in that evolutionary point. And modern humans don't have that, so there's where their discrepancy goes. Other than that, it's exactly modern humans, except for the small discrepancies. And it's almost like try to find what's different. Well, the only thing different is this supraorbital torus, right? Despite this, it was noted that the Jebel Irhoud specimen, whose cranium was complete enough to assess, showed hints of a modern basicranial flexion in the relationship of the face and the vault, and the teeth of another Jebel Irhoud specimen were subject to synchrotron analysis, which suggested a modern developmental pattern. So in other words, they're saying, well, the way the mouth worked and everything else is exactly like it is today. The only small discrepancy that they could say at the time is the suborbital torus. Now, when we look at Alterian people, they're at 145,000 years ago. So they're telling you that 145,000 years ago or more through Ibermerasians, which we show are related to people that are in the Green Sahara even much later, coming into a modern time in the last time that they had it. But then there's another surge of development of these proto-Caucasians here, and apparently it's involved with a whole lot of the people that are outside of this area and coming back in a blending of this blend that they had in northern Africa. But he's indicating clearly here that they were all over Africa. One site he doesn't mention in here is the Hofmeyr site. It's Hofmeyr, and it's down in the Cape, dating at 38 to 40,000 BC, and they say Caucasoid with it. And then they've also found down in Blombos Cave, which is right down on the point at 100,000 BC, a setup for red ochre. And it's very similar to two other sites of red ochre, which are up in more in Europe and later, of course, a little bit. But at that same time, it's like, huh. And of course, red ochre symbology is hooked all the way up to them with all the cave paintings they did and everything else. So interesting. And I guess I can see, sorry, pardon me. So I guess I can see where they've maybe edited a little bit, especially right there in that last part and in this part here, and the dating, and the other one seemed to be it to change just a couple of 100 years, and maybe they're just more refining the date and not giving it that. So plus your 250, they're saying it's this date, we're just going with that. It's the middle of every test we've done, something along that line. So anyhow, that dates it. And oh yeah, here's another picture. Here's that Jacques Hublin guy, and he's literally pointing at the nose and the two eyes orbital sockets. If you look at it right there, it's kind of hard to see, but there he is pointing it out. Yeah, so I got a heads up on this by somebody. Oh, I didn't check and see when last was this updated. It's always down at the bottom. This page was last edited 9th of June 2020 at 3:48. Wow, that's odd. I got an email that's probably 6 minutes after that about the change. Let's go back to and look at Asselar, man. And he said there was changes on there. When was the last, what is this? This page was last edited on May 30th, 2020. Okay, so right about a month ago or so. So actually way since I've done my old video onto it. True, okay. So that's the dating for black people or Negroid types, so West African people that were around. So yeah, so They don't predate anybody. And look at the dating here. It seems to have jumped over 100,000 years, but they also show that proto development into a modern human in somewhere between 145 and 160,000 years. They were totally modern humans admitted right there. And we've talked about how Cro-Magnon is still extant today, and they prophesize, although they don't have DA from these people, that it would have been the predecessors of that, which, if I'm understanding genetics, would have been in haplotype and its associations, right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Egyptologist 7, correct me if I'm wrong, but so it looks like it would have been something like that for these people right here. And so again, the out of Africa whole ideal is shattered regardless. It's kind of an in and out and back in and stuff. Yeah. Peace. Y'all enjoy. Comment down below. Hit like. Ring that bell. Make sure it's on. Peace.